Evening, guys. Gabe here from the FAI Wire. Hope you can all hear me okay. Um, Joining you on what could be is very likely a momentous day, and that is news of the death of Hassan Nasrallah, the chairman of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, who has been active in Hezbollah in Lebanon for the past 40 plus years. We still have not quite confirmed his death. It's looking increasingly likely that he was killed in an Israeli airstrike on what is described as a Hezbollah headquarters or command center in downtown Beirut underneath an apartment complex. So we're still waiting to get confirmation of that, and as well as the death of some other top Hezbollah figures. So hopefully we will hear about that very soon. Can you guys hear me okay? Sound up. All right, give me just a moment. How is that? Is that better? I got a heart from somebody, so I'll take that as a yes. So we did this a few days ago. Seemed to go pretty well. Got a good response, and thank you to all of those who gave good feedback. So we thought we'd try it again, and we upped our game a little bit this time, and we'll keep refining this process as we go along. So bear with us, please, as we get used to the ropes of doing live stream like this. I would say at this point we're in somewhat of a holding pattern, and we have been for about the past 8 hours or so since the strike in Beirut, not only to find out about Nasrallah's fate, but also to find out about the fate of all of his top leadership, his remaining top leadership, I should say, in Lebanese Hezbollah, as well as all of the Iranian liaisons that live basically in Beirut and coordinate with him on behalf of the Iranian regime. This began with Bibi Netanyahu's very passionate speech before the United Nations General Assembly this morning. If you didn't get a chance to watch that, I highly recommend that you take a few minutes and do so. Bibi is a great speaker, love him or hate him, but this was definitely one of his better speeches, despite the fact that half the room emptied out before he spoke, just once again illustrating the controversy of Zion among the nations. What we know now is shortly before his speech, he got word that Nasrallah was going to be meeting with his top leadership and perhaps IRGC leadership in Beirut. He's going to come out of whatever hole he usually hides in to come to this fortified bunker in downtown Beirut. The IDF and Israeli cabinet, the war cabinet, Bibi's top government officials had decided after Operation after Operation Beeper, that they would be looking to assassinate Nasrallah at the first opportunity. The idea behind Operation Beeper was to hopefully get Nasrallah to back off and comply with UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which required that Hezbollah withdraw above the Litani River. That obviously did not happen, even after a bunch of radios and other devices blew up, even after the Radwan strike in Beirut on Friday that killed the Hezbollah commando leadership. Even after hundreds of Hezbollah members were killed and thousands were maimed in different ways, Nasrallah seemed determined to continue on and not comply with UNSC 1701. And so at that point, at some point over the weekend or earlier this week, the decision was made by the Israeli cabinet to kill Nasrallah at the first opportunity. So in dramatic fashion, Bibi's getting ready to go stand in front of the world and give a speech, and he finds out that this meeting is going to be happening. And he gave the order to go ahead. He gave the green light, and the planes were up in the air as he was speaking. And shortly after his speech, several large 2,000-kilogram bunker buster bombs dropped out of Israeli fighter jets and struck that apartment complex in Beirut and apparently it looks like more likely than not killed him, his second in command and heir apparent, and who knows? We know so far that there are at least 8 bodies that have been pulled out of the rubble that haven't been identified yet, and several more are being searched for. So could be other top Hezbollah leadership, could be Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership in Lebanon. I would guess probably a combination of both. So at this point, we're still waiting for confirmation one way or the other. If you look at the crater that those bombs left, it'd be hard to imagine anything surviving. Sadly, this strike will probably involve a civilian death toll as well. Just like Hamas, Hezbollah ensconces itself in civilian populations under civilian apartment complexes and hospitals and schools and everything else. So obviously the Israelis could not give advanced warning about this strike as they normally would, and just had to take the strike when they had the opportunity to do so. So praying that the civilian collateral was not too much and that those who are wounded get adequate medical care. Nonetheless, a momentous day. Consequential times. So what we know now since the strike is that the Iranian regime has met in an emergency session. That could be to discuss the fallout and to assess the fallout of the strike. So far, Nasrallah and crew have not been in contact with anyone since the strike, obviously, so increasingly suggests that he is dead. And so the Iranian regime, no doubt, is meeting together to discuss how it's going to respond to this. As I talked about in the last live stream, so far, Iran has left Hezbollah somewhat high and dry. They didn't respond to Operation Beeper. They didn't respond to the Radwan strike that took out the Hezbollah commando leadership. And as Israel began bombing literally thousands of targets, over 2,000 targets across Lebanon, other than harsh rhetoric, the Iranian regime has not responded militarily yet. This may be the red line. In fact, I can't imagine that the regime won't respond in some way, especially if its Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership was also affected by the strike, if their leaders in Lebanon were also killed. So we shall see, again, how the Iranian regime responds. They're probably trying to assess what happened as well, just like the Israelis, just like everybody else. So as I said, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, and it's a little bit of wait and see until we get that news. In the meantime, there's still ongoing efforts to evacuate Americans and other Westerners from Lebanon. At this time, there were some efforts at coming to some kind of ceasefire earlier this week, yesterday and the day before. That's probably off the table at this point. Bibi at one point seemed to be entertaining a ceasefire, and then said, "Well, that's the Americans' gig. We're not going to negotiate without continuing the war at this point." And then again earlier today, he said, "Well, but maybe we are really interested in negotiating." And all of that might have been posturing just to kind of let Nasrallah and his gang let their guard down long enough to get them out of whatever holes they usually hide in and get them to meet together. If they thought there was actually a credible chance that there might be some kind of ceasefire that they would have to get together and meet about, then all it would take is, for signals intercept or the right human intelligence source on the ground or whoever to give the Israelis a heads up, hey, they're going to meet at such and such a place at such and such a time, and the trap is set. So if that was, I don't know for sure if that was the strategy, but if that was the strategy, it appears to have succeeded, and we shall see. But at this point, definitely no ceasefire. The IDF has announced, the IDF spokesman actually came out a few hours ago and announced that the next step is to be going after Hezbollah assets in Beirut. So the IDF did give citizens of southern Beirut, a suburb of southern Beirut, time to evacuate from their homes before another series of strikes began on Hezbollah assets there, and those are ongoing as I speak. Those strikes appear to be targeting land-to-sea missile batteries that Hezbollah has, which possibly could allow the IDF more breathing room as it conducts these strikes. It doesn't have to worry about Hezbollah anti-air or bringing its ships along the Lebanese coast if its warships want to also participate in these strikes. So again, the IDF, just like it did with Hamas, but in much more rapid pace, slowly degrading Hezbollah assets in Lebanon. And so the next few days, the IDF said are going to be complex. I can only imagine that means escalation, not only with Hezbollah or whatever's left of Hezbollah, but also with the Iranian regime. So Iran, for its part, has already placed its armed forces on high alert. It's already mobilizing its air force, and one could imagine its missile arsenal as well. So again, we could, by the time we wake up tomorrow morning, if you're here in the States or in the Western Hemisphere, we could get news of an Israeli or of an Iranian strike on Israeli territory, similar to or even more consequential than the last one we saw back in April. So please, as we always say, continue to pray for the people of Israel, the people of Lebanon, and the people of Iran, who are all unwilling pawns in their regime's jihad against the Jewish people. So, all right. I'm unfortunately on somewhat of a stopwatch here today. I've got a commitment in about 30 minutes, so I can stick around for the next 30, 40 minutes or so and answer your questions if you have any. Also, I'm not looking at my phone at the moment, so if anybody sees confirmation of Nasrallah's fate or any other breaking news, feel free to share it in the chat. Otherwise, any questions, fire away. And it's good to be back with you and looking forward to chatting with you here. Victoria mentioned the U.S. is claiming to not know about the airstrikes. Yeah, the last report I saw was that Israel's Minister of Defense was on the phone with Lloyd Austin, the United States Secretary of Defense, as the strikes were ongoing. To me, it's somewhat telling that the Israeli government has not given the American government advanced notice of any of its recent consequential strikes at all. At least not in Lebanon. So it's somewhat disappointing to me that, speaking as an American, my government can't be trusted as an ally with that kind of information. Yeah. All right, what do we got here? Gina from Texas. How you doing, Gina? Jeff from Tennessee. Jacksonville, North Carolina. Arizona. Hey, Stephanie. How's it going? Brother Jake, you are welcome. Mike Jake Dar is going off. Sorry, inside joke there. Okay. Hey, Gabe, what are some of the good sources FAI suggests to keep up with Israel news in addition to The Wire? Well, if you follow The Wire on X, Twitter, the platform formerly known as Twitter, we often repost our favorite sources. Depends on what arena we're talking about. If we're talking about Israel, there's quite a few of them that we love. We repost both independent journalists or journalists that are acting independently, Manny Fabian, Joe Truzman, Seth Franzman. We also repost certain news outlets that we trust In general, Times of Israel and J-Post, Jerusalem Post. Sometimes we'll even I just reposted Al Jazeera the other day. It just kind of depends on what it is. But in general, we found that independent journalists who maybe freelance for larger outlets, but who work independently on the ground in Israel, tend to be the most reliable. They have the best well-connected sources. They tend to report things the fastest. Trey Yingst, who works for Fox News, but is an excellent source, and we repost him often as well. Is often good for Israel as well. Kurdish territories, there's a whole nother slew of trusted sources that we have on the ground there. And what we tend to do, we typically don't lift the information from their posts and make them into our own posts. What we do is we repost them. And that's kind of a way of passing along those sources to you. The idea is not that we become a bottleneck or that we somehow monopolize the information. The idea is kind of passing along the source to you, and then you can follow them yourself. And you don't need the wire at that point. And what we do often is provide commentary, sometimes helpful, sometimes ridiculous. But we like to try to help distill that information down and interpret it geopolitically and prophetically as well. And sometimes we'll provide some context or some background to the posts that we're reposting, or at other times we'll give, kind of we'll do kind of like a historical series kind of thing, like we did on anti-Semitism a while back that maybe some of you saw. So for us, it's kind of a value add. Obviously, we do have some of our own sources on the ground, Stephanie Quick being one of them, and she's active on X, and if you don't follow her, you should. And we have other friends in different places in Israel as well. Obviously, Marco Moreno and a few other friends as well. So we do have our own personal correspondence on the ground, and we also have trusted sources and friends that we love, that are kind of part of our extended family, especially Seth, that we like to interact with and share their content. Seth's great, by the way. If you don't follow Seth Franzman, not only has he been an excellent source for information, and not only digesting information, but interpreting it and helping you to distill it and understand it and see it through a wider lens in Israel, but he's also done so in Kurdistan. In fact, our contact with him in the early days was during the Kurdish Peshmerga's conflict with the Islamic State in northern Iraq. So he's written some great books. He has a new book out recently on October 7th. The name is escaping me at the moment. I haven't read it yet. Stephanie's got it. She's reading it, so maybe she'll share a review with all of you at some point. But I highly recommend anything and everything that Seth has to say. We're pretty much like 95% in alignment in terms of interpreting these geopolitical events, and he just has great insight. And he's a free thinker, very independent dude. Writes for J-Post, and we love him. Hot Zone with Chuck Holton is 20-year war correspondent who is also Army Ranger. Yes, if you guys have suggestions for sources on the ground in the Middle East, especially in Israel, share them in the chat. I might like to see those as well. Yep, Jennifer Griffin is great. Question, what is the strongest calling to repentance you would submit to a Jew who corporately as a Jew is elected for salvation but individually not in Christ? Wow, that's a very deep question. Bob's my uncle. Actually, Bob's not my uncle. My uncle has a different name. But whoever that may be, I think I'm going to push pause on that question. That is an excellent question, and I don't mean to dodge it. But that is a much bigger question than I have time for in the next 20 minutes. One way I could say maybe answering that question is if you haven't seen our films Covenant and Controversy 1, 2, and 3, and the fourth installment we're working on now, I highly recommend those films. Those delve into that question. Joel Richardson's book, When a Jew Rules a World, also delves into that question. Dr. Michael Brown's book, Real Kosher Jesus, Isaiah 53 Explained, all delve into that question. We will, in terms of the gospel for the Jew, as the gospel for the Jew first, as the Apostle Paul would describe it in Romans chapter 1, that is definitely a subject that we have broached and will continue to broach. And on some other occasion, I would love to opine about that. In fact, I was just talking to some members of our FAI family about that earlier today. So that is an ongoing conversation that I think is definitely worth having. And it's a difficult one. It's a sensitive one, especially right now, with all the Jew hatred in the world. One thing we need to very much make clear is that we love the Jewish people, we stand with them, and that we will continue to do so as times get harder and harder. The greatest witness that the Jewish people are going to have, I think, at the end of the age, is seeing Gentile brothers and sisters choosing to suffer alongside them for the name of the Jewish Messiah. That was a testimony that was given to the Jewish people in the first century. You had the Apostle Paul and the Apostles Peter in chains in Rome as the city of Jerusalem was under siege by the Roman army. Literally both of those things happening at the same time, which I think is a profound testimony to the fact that the corporate suffering of Israel, of the man Israel, you could refer to the man Israel as the nation Israel, right, corporately, with whom God still has a covenant. As the man Israel continues to suffer towards the end of the age, especially leading up to Jacob's trouble, we as Gentile believers in Jesus, if you are a Gentile, have a critical role to play in standing alongside them in love, as a witness to one who is enjoying the covenant that was a promise to them in Jeremiah 31, as God said that he's going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel and Judah. And that new covenant that was inaugurated by Jesus around the supper table in the upper room in Jerusalem is that covenant that we are enjoying now. And so one way that we, as Paul describes in Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, can make Jews jealous of us is to enjoy that covenantal communion that we have with their God and with Messiah through Jesus, through Yeshua. And that is the kind of joy and blessing that we can have in that covenantal union that allows us to suffer with him and with them. We can gladly suffer as Jesus exhorted us to, through to the end of the age. I think in the midst of that suffering, here I go. I said I don't have enough time, but here I go. In the midst of that suffering at the end of the age, as we are joyfully taking on the suffering of Christ, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 3, one of my favorite passages, I want to know him, that is, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings. As we have fellowship with Jesus in experiencing those sufferings going into the end of the age, our Jewish covenantal counterpart looks at us and goes, why are they so joyful in the midst of the suffering? They don't have to suffer. They're not Jewish. Why are they choosing to suffer alongside of us and doing so joyfully? That's a thing to be jealous for, right? So it's not just, I have Jewish friends, and I attended a local Jewish synagogue here some time ago. And I didn't come in with Bible tracts. I didn't come in with the 4 spiritual laws. I didn't come in trying to do a DMM. I just came in. I went to Shabbat services on Saturday morning, started learning Hebrew and shul on Sunday mornings. And I just told them, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm not looking to convert. I am an Acts 15 Gentile believer in Jesus. I'm not looking to convert or to submit myself to the Torah, to the law of Moses, but I am a wild olive shoot grafted in with you. I didn't word it that way, but that's essentially what I told them. And I'm here for you. And I got the opportunity over time to not only talk about Jesus in their house, in their synagogue, but even to lead a teaching series that included quotations from the New Testament about love for the Jewish people. So I'll tell you what, I've told people this before. I don't know if I've done it in this large of an audience, but I'll tell you what. This is the time, people, if you haven't already connected with your local Jewish community, wherever you live, if there is a Jewish community, if there is a synagogue, Orthodox, conservative, Reformed, Reconstructionist, Chabad, whatever they are, find them, get to know them, go hang out with them for their holiday events if they're open to that. Make sure they know that you're not looking to convert. Make sure you don't come in with guns blazing, preaching the gospel. You're in their house, respect it. But just love them, hang out with them, pray for them, and then just see what God does. I guarantee you, you faithfully do that, you build relationships with them over time, things will happen eventually. It may take time, but it'll happen eventually. Don't be one of those drive-by preachers, because that only drives them away. Jewish people, unfortunately, from childhood, are raised to believe that all Christians are just trying to convert them, that Christians don't know them or understand them, and they're raised with the understanding of the long and sordid and unfortunate and tragic history of Christian, quote-unquote, Jew hatred over the last 2,000 years. So please don't contribute to that by getting overly zealous. Just be there, sit with them, learn from them, and Lord willing, the opportunity comes up for you to have a conversation with them about who Jesus is to you and about what he teaches. So there. All right. Yep, I couldn't. You're right, Kevin. I couldn't resist. And you know, there will be a lot more on that as time goes on, but that's all I have for now. That's all I have to say about that. Any other questions? Question: if Iran decides to attack, how long does it take for their missiles, rockets to reach Israel if launched from Iranian soil? So, good question. I'm glad you qualified that at the end with on Iranian soil, because that makes a big difference. Obviously, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has assets in Iraq, in Syria, up until a couple of days ago in Lebanon, but definitely still very much so in Syria and Iraq. So the IRGC launching missiles or rockets or drones from, a few dozen kilometers away in Syria is a big difference compared to a couple hundred kilometers, 200 or 300 kilometers, I can't remember, away in Iran. If we think back to the limited Iranian strike in April, the drones move very slow. And when they were launched from Iranian territory, it was like 2 hours. Right, so plenty of time. Cruise missiles, anywhere between an hour to 2 hours, depending on where they're launched from. Ballistic missiles is a different story. Those are the missiles that have a parabolic trajectory, right? They go up either into the high atmosphere or exo-atmospheric, so they actually go beyond the atmosphere and come back down in a terminal trajectory right down into its target. Those can be a matter of minutes, even less than a minute. So in that case, Israel has very little time to prepare. If Iran just launched everything it had, ballistic missile and cruise missile wise, at Israel all at once, they could theoretically overwhelm Israeli air defense. So Israel has several layers of its air defense. You're mostly familiar with the Iron Dome, right? So Iron Dome interceptors are little rockets that are programmed to go up and intercept a rocket it has to reach a certain altitude, first of all, and up in the air. And if it has enough time and it can, plot out the trajectory of that rocket, it can, most of the time, they say with like 95% accuracy, take out those rockets. But those are for short-range, surface-to-surface rockets, right? For medium-range and long-range missile, medium-range missiles and long-range missiles, ballistic missiles, Iron Dome doesn't work. It doesn't go high enough. So that's where you're talking about Arrow or David's Sling, depending on whether it's medium or long range. And so those defense systems, again, work very much like, I'm trying to remember the name of the American equivalent. They were developed by the same Northrop Grumman and some of the same defense contractors here in the United States. Again, are designed as a ballistic missile goes up out of the atmosphere and starts coming down in its terminal velocity. That's when something like the Arrow defense system can kind of plot its trajectory and then intercept, kind of like a linebacker intercepting a running back that's getting around the line in a football game. That's kind of the same concept, is as those ballistic missiles make a beeline straight down for their target. They're moving very fast, but they're coming down on a straight line, and the Arrow interceptors can snag them. But Israel doesn't have an unlimited supply of those interceptors. Obviously, the United States government has thankfully, the Biden administration has thankfully continued to fund and supply the IDF with those interceptors. The most important that has Iron Dome and the Arrow system and David's Sling have been the most consequential development in Israeli defense systems in the last decade, without a doubt. They have prevented thousands, not tens of thousands, of Israeli civilian casualties. And as people go on and on about proportional responses, just keep in mind that Hezbollah has fired over 11,000 rockets into Israel in the last 11 months. Average of 1,000 rockets per month. Not to count the thousands of rockets that Hamas fired into lower and central Israel since October 7th. If Iron Dome and David's Sling and Arrow didn't exist, there'd be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Israeli casualties. So when people talk about proportional responses and they're looking at a death toll, the only reason that there's not an exponentially higher death toll in Israel is because of those defense systems that were developed in, I think Iron Dome was deployed in 2012. So, Victoria is reporting Beirut is getting hammered right now, easily some of the most violent strikes in decades, according to OSI and T Defender. Yes, this war is already much bigger than the second Lebanese Israeli war in 2006. Stakes are obviously much higher this time. And it appears clear that the gloves are just pretty much completely off here. I mean, Israel's still doing what it needs to do to abide by international law, but it just wants to take out Hezbollah and quickly. And we always knew that would be the case, that Israel would move quickly because of the size of Hezbollah's missile arsenal. They couldn't take some of the same kind of like slow walking precautionary measures that they did with Hamas in Gaza. They would have to move fast and decisively, as they have so far. Nobody could have predicted the events of the last week week and a half, which has been shocking. Hezbollah is almost completely decapitated in a matter of a week. But we knew that when the time came that it would be swift and strong. I think we used the term shock and awe. If you're old enough to remember the American invasion of Iraq in 2003 and that first day of that bombing campaign in Baghdad, or it was just 4th of July, for about 2 days straight, as the United States Air Force just bombed the ever-loving crud out of that poor city. That was at the time labeled as shock, and I think it was the Pentagon that labeled it as shock and awe. The idea that you kind of put your enemy back on your heels with just this overwhelming force. And that is exactly what we see unfolding right now in the city of Beirut. Thankfully, the IDF did give civilians time to evacuate, which means Hezbollah gets out of there as well, but they can't move all of their assets, no pun intended, that quickly. And so, probably some of their more valuable military assets in terms of their missile arsenal and their air defense, and who knows what else they have up their sleeve. It's believed maybe even Scud missiles are right now being demolished, Lord willing. Do I think we could see the peace agreement of Daniel 9:27 soon? Sure. I believe that as the axis of resistance has weakened, such an agreement may suit them. Yeah, I mean, as we talked about on the last live stream, the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have both called for an alliance of Muslim states against Israel. In recent weeks. And just a few days ago, I think 3 days ago, Erdogan stood before the United Nations and called for just such an alliance. Doesn't seem like anything's really materialized so far. That has all been his usual rhetoric. But nonetheless, it's interesting that specific thing is now being called for. Keeping in mind that the dynamic is in Daniel 9 and Daniel 11, that the man of sin or the little horn or the king of the north is confirming such a covenant for 1:7. And that the context of that, at least according to Ezekiel 38, is that Israel is led to believe that it's not under threat anymore by its neighbors. So I don't know if an Islamic alliance against Israel is necessarily something that I'm looking for, but as some sort of alliance, especially a 10-nation confederacy, that a little horn might come along to confirm in order to put Israel at ease is definitely something to be looking for. But yes, seems like day by day we're kind of inching closer and closer here, and the pace of things is increasing rapidly, isn't it? So already, if you watch the Revelation study where we talked about the Beast Empire, the October 7th and the unfolding of the Beast Empire, we see that Daniel 11 dynamic already at play in the region. In fact, BB held up 2 charts today when he was addressing the General Assembly, one showing the cursed nations, as he called them, and one called the nations of blessing, that he's making peace agreements with, or trying to make peace agreements with, that they're opening economic corridors in. And he was talking about political agreements and economic agreements. He wasn't talking about Daniel 11, obviously, but it's kind of interesting that those maps lined up pretty much exactly with the outlines of the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic empires as they're described in Daniel chapter 11, obviously with the exception of Turkey, and for several reasons Bibi wouldn't put Turkey on the cursed map, at least not yet. But Turkey certainly has been very antagonistic. The Turkish government, I should say, has been very antagonistic towards Israel over the last year. So, definitely moving in that direction. Have you thought about doing a live split screen with Joel? I don't trust Joel in a live stream. Just kidding. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. I've thought about live streams with several of our members, so that could be something coming up. If Joel and I can sync schedules, obviously he's a very busy man, has a busy schedule with his family and traveling and the other things that he does. So if the stars could align schedule-wise, then sure, why not? Or with Steph, or with Marco, or maybe other members of the family. Question, any comment on the conspiracy regarding Albert Pike's letter to Giuseppe Mazzini circa 1880 regarding 3 world wars and the third being Islamic world versus political Zionism? I am not familiar with that conspiracy. If you want to post a link in the chat, I'd be willing to check it out, but that I have not, I'm not informed on, so I couldn't speak to that yet, unfortunately, sorry. All right, we're cooking with gas here, as they say. Any other questions? Looks like Hashem Safi al-Din is deceased. Yes, that is the nom de guerre of Nasrallah's second in command, or was his nom de guerre anyway, his Islamic war name. He is more likely dead than Nasrallah. Was Nasrallah's heir apparent, second in command, the head of kind of the political religious side of Hezbollah, and his son was married to Qassam Soleimani's daughter, who's the now deceased head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that President Trump ordered to have assassinated at the Baghdad airport 4 years ago. So he is probably dead. There are probably quite a few other Hezbollah leadership, members of Hezbollah leadership that are dead. As I said, they've pulled 8 bodies out, and probably some Iranian leaders as well. So not sure what this means yet for Hezbollah. If there's anybody left to talk to, doesn't seem like it's going to be very long before Hezbollah is just kind of some underground ragtag guerrilla force. Which, by the way, the IDF announced today that as far as they're concerned, and this is debatable, but as far as the IDF is concerned, Hamas in Gaza is degraded to the point now where they aren't really an actual political entity in the Gaza Strip anymore. They're not any kind of organized military force in the Gaza Strip anymore. They're not a viable enemy anymore for the IDF. They're now just basically a guerrilla force, insurgent guerrilla force. I kind of compare that to when the United States and the international coalition went after ISIS, the Islamic State, and eventually kind of took back all of ISIS territory in Iraq and Syria, and then what was left of ISIS kind of went underground, and they're still underground to this day, and they're still conducting attacks, and now and again the United States or the Iraqi government or the Kurdish government in eastern Syria will conduct some kind of raid or some kind of strike on what's left of ISIS. I kind of see that being the new norm now for Hamas in Gaza. Obviously, they're not all dead. They're only, as Billy Crystal would say in The Princess Bride, mostly dead. So over half of their militants have been killed, many more out of action. All of their military hardware pretty much gone. They can barely lob a rocket over the Gaza fence nowadays. For as long as Israel is in Gaza in kind of their posts in the Netzarim corridor and along the Philadelphia corridor, the priority for the IDF right now in Gaza is finding the hostages. Those are priorities 1, 2, and 3. And so that effort continues. So that is definitely something we can pray for, is that whichever hostages are still alive could somehow be rescued alive. Still don't know if Yahya Sinwar is alive or dead. We haven't heard hide nor hair of him. since an IDF airstrike. I think I talked about that in the last live stream. So waiting to hear about Sinwar, waiting to hear about Nasrallah, just waiting, just chilling. Gabe, is there anything we can pray about for you? Well, thank you for that. And yes, it's busy right now. Got a lot going on. I have a full-time job. I have a day job here. I work on the staff at my church here in Northern California. And I have a family, wife and kids here at home. A large family. Actually, we have several kids, adults, and several that are still in the home. And my hobby is the work that I do for FAI, the Maranatha Global Bible Study, the articles that we do, the wire, interacting with you guys and doing different things that I can do behind the scenes. This is my hobby. So you could just pray for me and for everybody in the family. It's a very busy time. Obviously busy for Steph and Marco right now in northern Israel as they're hunkering down yet again in their bomb shelters in their homes. And for the whole FAI family, obviously many of you know I'm not going to get into this, but many of you know what's going on right now with the Grace investigation for FAI. So I say continue to pray for our family in that. For the Lord's will to be done, for the truth to be made known, and for the report to be fair and accurate. I believe he is chief counsel as well. Yeah, he was kind of like Nasrallah's right-hand man, right? Like his go-to spiritual advisor. He was. Any other questions? Jews, I don't think they'd respect that disposition anyway. Yes. Good word. Okay, guys. Well, unless you have any other questions, and again, thank you for joining me, I'm going to go ahead and jump off. As always, it's good to be with you. We'll do it again. Kind of, as I said, refining this process as we go along. And so you may see improvements and changes here and there. I don't know yet if we're going to have the idea. This is actually an idea that we've had for The Wire for a while, only because we haven't been able to do scheduled videos for a while. We thought about scheduling live stream Q&As. It's something we're going to start next year, but obviously, we had some consequential things happening over the last week that we thought we'd move up the schedule for that. So that's why we're kind of duct taping things together here at the moment, but at the same time, learning as we go. And hey, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be polished. As long as you can hear and see me and I can get your questions, mission accomplished. So, all right, guys, I'm going to jump off. This video will be available on YouTube within the next 12 to 24 hours. So if you missed part of it or all of it, and you're just jumping on now at the end, don't worry, it'll be available. Please share. Please like and share. Please subscribe, all of that good stuff. We love you. We'll talk to you soon. Blessings and Maranatha.